Hi, welcome to Chapter and Verse. I'm here today. I'm Rick Bleiweiss, and I'm here today with a phenomenal person, Laura Morton. Laura is the author of over 60 books, of which 21, that's a staggering number, have
20,
been New York Times bestsellers. 20?
23.
23. Oh my
Usually goes by
God.
23rd. Yeah.
I'm behind the times. And Laura has co-written books with Jennifer Hudson, Al Roker, Melissa Etheridge, Deborah Roberts, Justin Bieber, the Jonas Brothers, Susan Lucci, Joan Lunden. I mean, the list is endless, as well as business books with Bob Parsons, John Maxwell, and others. She's been in the entertainment industry for a number of decades. And she also, I believe, wrote and produced a documentary film, and we'll talk about that. And she's a heck of an entrepreneur. She has her own imprint, 𝐬𝐮𝐫𝐞 Books, which I'm pleased to say will be coming over to Blackstone shortly. And for those of you who don't know what a imprint is, it's like a brand. So you would have a primary publisher and then a second publisher, if you will, the way like Penguin Random House might have Penguin Random House Kids, or we have Blackstone and Weird Tales. So that is kind of what an imprint is. So, hi, Laura.
Rick, thank you so much for that incredible introduction. I don't, I mean, I'm like, who is he talking about?
Well, it is certainly you. So let's start with where'd you grow up and what were you like as a kid?
You know, so I grew up in the suburban Detroit.
Oh, okay.
I did not grow up in the city of Detroit. And my childhood was it was a little bit different than most because I lost my mother when I was 10.
Oh, wow.
And
So,
so, thank you. And my mom was sick my whole life. So I didn't have this like incredible, home life, family life because my father was really caring for my mother. And so I had a lot of people that were in and out of my life. And people, in fact, my fifth grade school teacher, this is such a great story, is one of my dearest friends to this day. We just celebrated
really?
52 years of friendship.
Wow.
And I don't even look 52. How can that
No,
be?
you don't.
But she happens to live where I live now, and we just went to a concert together last Tuesday, this like a couple of days ago. And so, it's amazing how people will rally around you in a community and how important that is and how impactful that is. So when I think about, me as a kid, I really think that in a strange way, my life was very blessed because I had so many of those people around me, as opposed to, feeling lost and lonely as one would when they lose their mother at such an early age.
Wow. Well, it's good you had that support system around you for sure. Did you
Yeah.
have brothers and sisters?
Yep, I have a brother, and he still lives in Michigan. And my father eventually remarried, and so I have a stepbrother and stepsister, and you'll laugh because their names are Steve and Edie.
Really?
And by design, the parents were big fans, I guess, because Steve's middle name is Lawrence. But he loved that name so much he actually changed his name to Prepo. So,
Wow.
but yeah, so my dad remarried a woman who was a bridesmaid at my mom and dad's wedding. So I knew her my whole life.
Wow. So you got along with her, what it
Yeah,
sounds like. Well,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
That's great.
You
So
can't make it up, Rick. This is why I write nonfiction.
when did you, speaking of nonfiction, when did you discover you liked writing and you were good at it?
Well, so I was one of the early pioneers in the special interest home video market. And
Oh,
yeah, so I was doing a lot of content. I was doing a lot of one-offs, a lot of music videos. I mean, I covered like the World Championship Ultimate Frisbee, tournament, right? So a lot of really random stuff. And then I kind of fell into doing
wait a minute.
celebrity exercise.
I want to go back to that for a second.
Sure.
What did you do with the videos after you shot them? In other words, what was
I
the
was a gun for
market?
hire. And in all of those instances, I was a gun for hire. So yeah, so record label would hire me to do a music video,
Okay.
or and I did. So it really started off with, and you'd have to be of a certain age, but I worked on a video called Champions Forever. And it was the only time that Muhammad Ali, Ken Norton, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Sugar Ray Leonard were all put in the same room
Wow.
to talk about the boxing. And that really kind of, that kind of got me started. It's funny though, because I actually now, oh, I'll finish this story because it was an amazing story. And I got to meet all of these incredible legends. And uh, they all paid homage to Ali because he really changed the face of boxing for every single one of his men,
He did.
and made them all very wealthy. And so when we were making that video, we were licensing footage from Don King because he owned
Okay.
everything.
Yeah.
And but what really got me started is a video that I did because I was working as a headhunter, and I had my own recruiting and search firm, and I decided to do this video on how to interview for a job. It was just, and by the way, I'm dating myself because I keep referring to all of this as videos.
Yeah, right.
And, so which for anybody watching this or listening to this who doesn't know what a video is, it is the opposite. I mean, it was streaming, but you actually had to have a cassette that you popped into a machine to watch it.
Right.
So,
A
uh,
VCR.
yeah, exactly. Or even a beta. Like when I started
Okay.
out, it was like a beta machine. So I did this video on how to interview for a job because what I had noticed was that we were spending a lot of time at my company. We were spending a lot of time prepping people for their interviews, and the people that we were placing were all executive level
Okay.
um, candidates. So they hadn't interviewed for a job. They had been bumped up into their career positions and hadn't changed companies, a lot. So we were spending a great deal of time just getting them prepped for their interview. So I said, oh, we'll throw it on video. And I was working out at my gym. I was living in Detroit. This was after college, and I went back to Michigan for a very short period of time. And I was working out, and the guy next to me, he and I just struck up a conversation, and I was telling him that I had just done this video, and he stopped in the middle of his workout, and he said, I'd like to see that. I happen to work for the college promotions division of Ford Motor Company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I said, well, I mean, sure, I'll send it to you. So I sent it to him, and about 2 weeks later, he called me up and he said, yeah, I think we'd like to buy 50,000 copies of this video from you. And I thought, well, this is a cool thing.
Yeah.
And I said, do me a favor, can you put it in writing? Send me like a purchase order. That would be great. And when I hung up the call, I knew immediately if Ford had a college promotions division, Chrysler must have one, GM must have one. And so I took the purchase order that he sent and I shopped it.
Okay.
I said, well, this is what Ford wants to do.
Right.
And so as it turns out, Chrysler wanted to buy 75,000
Oh,
copies.
that's even better.
It was even better. And they tagged a little message from 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐿, if you remember
Oh,
that
yes, I
name,
remember Iacocca.
that said, we at Chrysler are very proud of you, and you've worked very hard to get your college degree, and now you need two things, a job and a car, and we want to help you get both. So that's what kind of catapulted me. And I felt like the Beverly Hillbillies because I loaded up the truck and I moved to Beverly. I moved to California.
Oh, okay.
And yep, I loaded up my Saab. Um, and which I had because I went to school in Boulder, Colorado, so it was a good car for the snow.
Oh, yeah.
Favorite ad in those days was an ad that ran in Aspen that said, in some towns, even your Saab can't outrun the police because the police cars in Aspen were Saabs. So
That's funny.
so I moved to LA and thought, this seems like a pretty fun way to make a living. And I still worked as a headhunter because that was paying the bills until production was paying the bills.
Got
And
it.
and I gave up being a recruiter, a career recruiter. So
So,
that's really what put me into the business.
so how long did you do the video production work?
Several years. I mean, several years, and there were a lot of incarnations of what I was doing. I mean, the first video that I did on my own after I worked on Champions Forever. And by the way, Champions Forever for a long time was like if a fight went short on HBO, Champions Forever is what they showed.
Oh, cool.
And you've probably seen the poster from Champions Forever, and it's all those guys all in tuxedos with boxing gloves around their neck. like, you know, like,
Yeah, I think I have seen that. Yes.
yeah, it was. And the idea was to do like Champions Forever of basketball and Champions Forever of football and baseball. Um, but so I moved on, and the first video that I did was like the complete opposite of that. I did an adaptation of a book called Planning a Wedding to Remember. And the book was written by a husband and wife who ran this company that was a very large wedding supplier, like wedding planning books and, you know, guides and all the stuff you would need. And I thought, well, this seems like a good idea. Let's make a video out of this. And that kind of started me down that path. So when I say special interest, it was all over the board. And I did a lot of work with various video distributors. And so that's where we always did it. And I would get my funding from the distributors. They would pay for it.
Right.
And so, they ended up owning it. And that's kind of how I got started in doing the exercise videos.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And were you writing them?
So back to your original question. Thank you for bringing it back around. No, I had writers, but what would happen is I would start on doing the scripts.
Okay.
I would be, well, this isn't exactly what I wanted to say. And I didn't set out in any way to be a writer or an author. It wasn't really, I liked being a producer. I like putting things together. I'm a deal maker. And I have a vision for what something can become, which is really, I think, the art of producing, if you will.
Right.
And so no, but what would happen is I would just start undoing these scripts and reworking them and just taking what was there and making it better. And so that kind of got me interested in writing, but I really didn't think about writing at all until I did an exercise with Joan Lunden, who you mentioned earlier. I
Yeah.
did an exercise video with her. She was the host of Good Morning America at the time, and she'd gone through a very high profile divorce. She
Okay.
lost a lot of weight. She looked amazing. And so she did this exercise video that she was, Republic Pictures, believe it or not, like funded this one. And Joan and I, it's like I had met my long lost, you know, twin sister
Right.
because we became instant friends.
Cool.
And, after we had finished filming, we went to dinner and I said, I think you're just telling a piece of your story. I think you need to write a book. You represent like 50% of the women in this country are newly divorced and single moms and raising their kids and working and all the things that you're now encountering. I think it would be really helpful if you wrote some of this down,
Yeah.
And she said, well, that sounds great. Will you do it with me? So there may or may not have been a little Chardonnay involved in the conversation. Uh, but by the end of that dinner, we had mapped out what this looked like, and we had created something that was sort of niche, interesting, and different at the time because what we created was a part cookbook, part memoir.
Oh, wow.
Right. Very, it was sort of a unique combination. And the reason why we decided to do the cookbook piece of it was we wanted to put the recipes in that Joan liked that helped her lose her weight.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Right. So we thought it was a great idea. We thought it was a really good idea. And the next day we went to see her agent at William Morris, Jim Griffin, who was very high up, if not the head of the television department at the time. And in our excitedness, we were saying, "Oh my, can you believe this is such a good idea?" And he was like, "It's the worst idea I've ever heard."
That's what he said.
To our face. And I literally was like worst idea ever? Like you've never heard of anything worse? But I didn't think it was that bad, right? And he's like, yeah, it's a horrible idea. And I said, well, can you tell me why? And he said, well, Joan doesn't cook. And I said, but you know that. But
Right.
Joan's in the kitchen with 20 million viewers a week, 5 days a week. And she's cooking with Julia Child and Wolfgang Puck and all of these amazing
Right.
Jacques Pepin, like all of these amazing chefs. America doesn't care if Joan can cook. This is who she's getting the recipes from.
Right.
And he's like, well, good luck with this project, you know. So we left. Joan said, well, we tried. I said, nah, let me run with this. And having never written a book or sold a book, I
Okay.
went knocking on doors because again, that was the producer in me that went to, I knew how to go out and ask for what we wanted. And I landed a very substantial deal for us.
Well,
I got
cool.
a, I got a $350,000 offer.
Wow. What publisher was it?
I
Do you remember?
I know because I remember where it landed. Little
Okay.
Brown ended up with the book.
Okay.
But I can't remember who I got the offer from because what happened was we took it to Joan's attorney,
Okay.
and he had recently done a book deal for Diana Ross
Okay.
and worked with an agent by the name of 𝐿𝐿oman, who was legendary.
Okay.
And, Swifty Lazar, 𝐿𝐿oman, that era of book agents.
Got
And
it.
he said, let me call Al and he just got Diana a lot of money. Let me see, run this past him. And Al said, I'll double the money. And
Wow.
he did.
Wow.
And he did. And when Jim Griffin, heard that we sold the book for $750,000, suddenly it wasn't such a bad idea because he got his percent, right?
Yeah, right.
So yeah, so we did, and that book was on the New York Times bestseller list for 21 weeks. Although I
Wow.
have to tell you that I almost got fired from that book because I had never written a book.
Okay.
And what happened, and Joan's only been to Blackstone to do her audiobook. They're on her current memoir, which is doing amazing. And we're so happy that we partnered with you on audio. And maybe we'll
Right.
do book 12 with through 𝐿SAGA Books. But the Joan gets very excited about things, and she's a researcher. And
Okay.
what she did is she took this research binder and she sent it off to the publisher, and they panicked because they thought there's nothing here. It's a bunch of research and there's no writing. There's nothing here. Fire the writer. We need to find her a writer.
Okay.
And we had to go back to them and explain, no, 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 that's actually not the writing. Like,
Right.
like Joan just wanted you to see because she's an overachiever. She's the most amazing doer on the planet. Like that woman never sleeps, right? And so they salvaged my job and ultimately salvaged my career in being a writer.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what did that lead to? How I'm assuming 23 New York Times bestsellers later, that led to something.
Well, that book was my first. So out of the
Yeah.
gate, that was my first New York Times bestseller. And that was, I mean, today, can you imagine your Mel Robbins to be on the list for 21 weeks,
Yeah.
right? And so, we did really well with that book. We did a second book, a quick follow-up.
Okay.
At this point, Joan and I had become very good friends. We were doing a lot of stuff together anyway, a lot of other things. And we went on a mountain climb together, and that was filmed for Good Morning America, where we both swore that um, our next vacation would be in the Caribbean because mountain climbing was hard. But we had gone on this mountain climb immediately after that disaster on the Into Thin Air disaster on Mount Everest. And
Right.
we trained for our mountain climb in a gym where one of the people on the mountain was a member of our gym.
Wow.
And so, it was a big news story. And
Yeah.
the ABC executives were not thrilled that we were going on this trip. And but it was fun, and we summited the Grand Teton,
Oh,
which in the
cool.
summertime you can walk up, but when there's still snow and ice, it's actually kind of a treacherous
Oh,
climb, and it
yeah.
was what we did. But that led to our second book because the second book, so the first book was called Healthy Cooking, the second book was called Healthy Living.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot of the adventures and things that we were doing were featured in that book and written about starting over and dating again. And, at that point, Joan had met the man she's now married to. And so there was a lot of content that just really resonated. And that was my second New York Times bestseller. So the question, and being competitive, the question became, am I a good writer, or is it because I have Joan Lunden as an author?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So my agent at the time called me and said, I've got a book that's a year overdue. You think you want to jump in on it? And I said, I'll take it. And it was Marilu Henner, that book, that green book in the background right there.
Yeah.
Marilu Henner's Total Health Makeover.
Okay.
Don't know what you know about Judith Reagan, but that book was done for Reagan Books.
Okay.
Judith was notoriously one of the most difficult people to work with in publishing.
No, I didn't
She
know her.
drew 450 loose pages at my head,
Really?
truly. That was Judith. And the asterisk footnote to that story is to date, that is still my number one best-selling book.
Really? So why did she throw the pages? She just didn't like what she did.
Nope, I was having a pagination problem. They needed the manuscript. And back in those days, and this was, I think I wrote this book in like, Joan was 94, 95. So this is probably 96,
Okay.
right? Um, in those days, you worked off of a floppy disk, and I couldn't get the pagination right. And there was some glitch in my Word that just it was not paginating.
Okay.
And so I hand wrote on 450 pages, page one, page two, page three, page four, right? And I walked in because in those days you actually delivered the manuscript,
Yeah, I
50
remember.
pages is thick, and with my floppy, and I put it on her desk and I said, I just want to let you know, I'm, I don't know what the problem is. I don't know how to fix it, but I've handwritten the numbers on the page, and she picked it up and she chucked it at me. And I was stunned. I mean, stunned. But if you can get the visual, if you could just slow motion, the pages just flying and floating and falling to the ground. And me just standing there like like a deer in the headlights. What just happened?
Yeah, right.
And I just, the only thing I could muster up to say, Rick, was it's a pagination problem. It's not a content problem. And I walked out of her office. And I had the floppy in my hand, and some guy, lucky me, was standing there and heard the whole thing. And he goes, "Psst, give me your disc." And like 10 seconds later, he had it worked out.
Oh, wow. That was
So when
great.
I walked back in, I turned around and I went, "Oh my God, you're a lifesaver. Thank you." And I walked back in with the disc, and I like was shaking. And I was putting it down on her desk, and she was on her hands and knees picking up those pages. And I thought, I mean, this is just bizarre, right? It's, you can't make it up. And I just put it on her desk and I said, the problem's been solved. And to today, there are two letters that I kept in my desk for a very long time.
Okay.
One was my rejection letter of Billy Blanks, who created 𝐼𝐵𝐿.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I rejected Billy Blanks when I was producing exercise videos. If
Okay.
I had not rejected Billy Blanks, I would have a lot of money.
Yeah, okay.
So that was a reminder. I actually ended up doing something with the woman who was Michelle Pfeiffer's stand-in and as Catwoman, and I just thought she's a hot chick. Like, why wouldn't you go with her?
Right.
And, and I thought she would sell well, and I was wrong, 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 wrong.
It happens.
Yep. And the other letter that I keep in my desk is a congratulatory note from Judith Reagan telling me what a wonderful memoir or what a wonderful manuscript that was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
That made
I
up for
think those are very
throwing
rare.
pages. Yeah, yeah, it is rare.
Yeah. So, yeah, so that's how, so, I mean, I got really lucky, Rick, because the people that I'm telling you right now, if you had told me then, and if you today, given everybody I've worked with, that that's still the book, that's still my bestseller, and that I still get royalty checks on that book from 1996, 1997, it's unheard of, right? We
Yeah,
ended up doing a second book together, and in that process, somewhere in there, I did a book with Jerry Springer, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on, So it was just New York Times bestseller, New York Times bestseller, New York, and it was truly a function. What this book proved to me was that I could write,
right.
and it wasn't just Joan Lunden, and that I knew her voice so well, and if you look at my body of work and the fact that I've worked with so many men, so many women. I my running joke is, I've been I've been a bounty hunter. I've been an elite athlete. I've driven race cars. I'm gay. I'm straight. I'm bi. I'm like, because I've written stories where I'm a rock star. I've written stories I'm in the top boy band because I write in first person,
Yeah,
right? And I'm Mormon, I'm Christian, I'm Jewish. Like it, my adaptability allowed me to do all of these amazing books with amazing people. And I've been incredibly, incredibly lucky. And I do think that's luck that the people that I've had the privilege of working with have all been pretty great.
That is good. But let me ask a question. How does the writing process work? Is it different with different celebrities? I mean, do some of them go to you, here's my notes, write my book? Do they write with you? How does the process usually work when you're writing someone else's memoir?
Sure. I have to say there is no formula
Okay.
because everybody needs something different. And when you really understand the psyche about why somebody chooses to write a book, right? I
Yeah.
think you have to sort of cater to that. And so I always tell people I'm a very good study in sociology.
Okay.
And
Probably true.
and yeah, and probably a very good therapist because for everyone, one thing that's universal is it's a cathartic process. Even if you go into it thinking it won't be, it always is. At least working with me. I cannot speak to how other people work and what their
Right.
process is. I mean, we know, there are great stories of authors who, immerse themselves. They move into somebody's house and they're with them
Right.
24/7. That is not me. I believe wholeheartedly in that boundary. At one point I put in a separate phone line. This is when we had like, actual phone lines in the home. That was my dedicated personal phone line so that if any of the other lines rang after hours, I didn't have to answer,
Got it. Okay.
right? So
Yep.
my running joke was that Macy's has hours too. Like at some point you have to unplug,
Right.
right? And but for me, it really is understanding what the author wants to get out of the book first. What do you want the book to accomplish?
Okay.
And and not just for you, but for your reader. What do you want them to get out of it?
Right.
Then I kind of dream backwards. Like I think of it as like a little bit of like a helix that we go, okay, so this is where we want to go. Wait, what do we need to do to take it there? So it's very methodical. I still to this day, even in this world of Zoom where we can, see each other, there is nothing that replicates being in person
Oh, yeah.
because, when you're on a Zoom, I don't care how engaged somebody is, they're still glancing at their phone. They still are looking at the clock. I don't like working with people in their office.
Right.
There's too many distractions.
Yep.
So, over the years, you just learn. For a long time, people came to my apartment. I had a beautiful apartment in Manhattan on the 68th and 69th floors of a building in Midtown. It
Okay.
was all white. Everybody called it the cloud because that's exactly what it felt like. You know, Jerry Springer is the only person I let smoke cigars in that apartment. Um, but it was a very comfortable, safe space. And that's really, I think, so much of what allows somebody, if somebody feels safe,
Yes.
they feel comfortable, they will talk to you in a whole different way.
Yes.
And, there was a period of time when I was working with Marilu, she was doing Chicago, 8 shows a week on
Wow.
Broadway. She would get to my house around 11:15 at night.
Wow.
And I always had a Belvedere martini waiting for her. So in the credits, when we're thanking all these people, we also thank Dr. Belvedere in this book, right? Um, I try to put the fun in the project. I
Right.
very early on, I decided I didn't want to be the appointment in anyone's calendar that when they see my name, they go, "Oh, I don't want
Right.
to do that." I want them to look forward to it.
Yep.
And so I go out of my way to create an environment that opens people up. We did Susan Lucci's book together, and the book that where we started and where we finished were two very different books, and you ended up with I think, a much better, more meaningful book because I gave Susan that space to find that voice.
What was it going to start out to be?
You know,
We're talking
and
about La Lucci, which is the most recent of Susan and Laura's memoirs. So
uh,
how did it, what was the morph from what to what?
well, I mean, look, when I met with Susan, she called me. We had done a book prior to La
Right.
Lucci, and what's amazing is when you work with the people that I work with and they trust you, and that's another piece of the equation is that there has to be two things to make it work: truth and trust, period. Without those two things, it will never work.
Right.
You'll never end up with the book that you should have, that they should have, and then
Right.
ultimately as a publisher that you should have. Um, but Susan trusted me. And she knew right away. And she had a lot of people telling her, Nelson DeMille said, you really need to work with Laura again. And there were Sally Richardson was also telling her the same thing, who is also an icon in publishing.
Yeah.
And, Nelson DeMille is such an accomplished writer, was such an accomplished writer in fiction. And so talk about high praise, how
Yeah,
I felt
it
about
sure
that.
is.
And so she called me and we met for lunch at Bergdorf's. And I'd known that her husband had passed away, but I did not know how fragile Susan was when we met and had lunch that day. And it was very new. Helmut had passed away, within that year.
Okay,
And so she was still grieving. And because of the intimacy of the relationships and intimacy in the sense, when you break that word down, that it really breaks down into me, you see,
ah,
because that really is what I do. I connect dots for people that they didn't even know were there,
okay, that makes sense.
right?
Yeah,
You know, so as Susan, was laying out the book that she had initially talked about wanting to do, I shook my head and said, that's wonderful. And which is, exactly what I needed to say in that moment, but I knew it wasn't the book.
okay,
And so I knew that she was going to need time and gentle guidance and
right.
more trust building because, for the first time in her life, she was doing something that is a huge undertaking. When somebody decides to write a book, it's an enormous
Oh, yeah,
undertaking that can be exceptionally emotionally draining.
yep,
And so I just needed to nurture where she was at on any given day. And so that, that's what happened. But as time went on and we built more trust and I was getting more stories and kind of steering the conversations towards the content that I thought her reader would really want to know,
right,
you know, because when I tell you I connect dots that people don't see themselves, it's because, most people, we live our lives. Monday is Monday, Tuesday is Tuesday. I don't really think about Monday on Tuesday. And with Susan, I don't think that she had put together that she had significant losses in her life every year, starting like really since the loss of all my children going off the
right,
air, right? Which I think was like 2014 maybe. But in 2017, it was physical loss. She was losing people that were really important to her. And
wow,
she had never put that together and never really grieved. And, was grieving, right?
right,
But not in the whole, right?
right.
And so it was amazing when we could talk through some of that. Not that I'm not her therapist, I wasn't her therapist, and it is not my job. But when you can see something, I have an aunt who always has the best sayings. But this is a well-known saying, but one of her favorite sayings is so often we can spot the flea on someone else's shoulder and miss the elephant on our own,
Right.
right?
Good
And
quote. Good quote.
that's just what happens in life, right? And because we move, we're just constantly in motion. When you're a celebrity, when you're anybody that I've worked with, and their life is just constantly in motion, you don't have time to think about that stuff.
But you said your job is not to be the therapist, and I agree with that, except um,
I am.
for you yeah, you are, but for you to get the best book out of someone, they need to expose their emotions to you because a book without emotion is not a good book. And so, in effect, you are enabling them. Maybe you're an enabler to a degree. You're enabling them to put it out there, some things that they may not have otherwise realized or wanted to put out there.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. I think that I become a vessel, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I'll write something that when they read it for the first time, their reaction is stunned.
Really?
Yes, because they hadn't put it together.
Got it.
They hadn't had that aha moment. They hadn't quite figured out why I feel this way, or what it was that impacted me to such a degree that this is how I am now. And so I think of myself as more of the vessel. And because I do write in first person, And
Right.
it's amazing when you write in first person. I did a book with a businessman by the name of Glenn Stearns, who, uh, talks about his cancer diagnosis and treatment in such vivid detail. And he tells an amazing story about going in for really hardcore radiation. He had throat cancer.
Oh,
And when
wow.
they did radiation, and it was really targeted radiation, but they had to staple his head so it could not move to the table
Wow.
with a mesh um, mask over his face that his eyelashes could pop out of. Like, this is how vivid we tell the story.
Wow.
And, when you write in first person about that, you take on that emotional, that memory,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that I went in for an MRI not so long ago. And when they put me in the tube, all I could think about was Glenn on the table. And, and it
Makes
wasn't
sense.
my memory.
Right.
It wasn't my memory. And it would have been an easy time for me to panic, actually,
Right.
but I kept reminding myself, this isn't your memory. This isn't, and that happens a lot,
Oh, yeah.
because the emotional stuff, I mean, when I worked with Elizabeth Smart and I worked with her 45 days after she came home.
Okay.
And if, your audience doesn't remember who Elizabeth is, she was abducted from her home. And 9 months later, she was found. And it's a
Right.
harrowing, horrible story. And because the story it isn't just what she went through, which was horrific, but also what the family was put through, and how that, ultimately can impact and destroy a family or bring them together,
Right.
So you carry all of that with you, and that never goes away. I mean, I don't know wherein there's a part of my job that I'm the luckiest, really luckiest woman on the planet, because I get to live so many incredible life experiences
Yeah.
and learn life lessons without actually having to go through them, right? Failures,
Right.
successes, you name it. And on the other hand, there's so much trauma that I write about,
Yeah.
and I carry that with me as well. And it makes me a very empathetic person, or maybe I was already empathetic and it's sharpened those skills.
Right.
I think empathy is also a bit of what makes or gives somebody the um, ability to open up, right? Because they feel seen and heard. And I mean, I love that when Oprah on her last day of her show said, didn't matter who she interviewed. Every single person from presidents to housewives to actors to, athletes, they all wanted the same thing. They all just wanted one thing, and that was acknowledgement.
Hmm.
Not like, look at me, I'm great, but do you see me? Do you
Right. Yeah.
right? And I never forgot hearing that from her. And she's such a wonderful interviewer.
Yeah.
And and I feel like that is definitely one of my skill sets. I think Barbara Walters was an incredible interviewer, but different. I'm a
Yes.
very different interviewer, but boy, when I get someone to cry in our first session, and I will readily admit this, it's a win because I know that they trust me.
Yeah. You're right.
It's not because I want them to cry, but I get them to go someplace where they will visibly show me this was a hard thing.
Right.
I leave every time I leave those sessions, I go, okay, we're good. We're going to be fine. And when they don't, I work really hard to get there.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking now about good or bad. I'm talking about easy versus hard. What is there one or two books you've written that were the hardest for you to write? And were there one or two that were the easiest for you to write?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Joan's books are always easy for me because I can finish her sentences, right? Um, I actually have actually written the sentences that she now uses.
Okay.
Um, but to that degree, let me start with Joan because I wrote Joan's breast cancer memoir.
Okay.
And when Joni called me and shared with me privately that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and as I told you, this is a woman who just doesn't rest, right? She
Right.
said, but I want to chronicle my journey, and I need you to be on this journey with me. Will you do this with me? And I took a deep breath and I said, I will, on the condition that if it's interfering with your treatment, then we just put a pin in it. Like it's
Right.
that simple. Like your health is number one. So
Right.
we wrote that book, and my daughter, who was young at the time, 7-ish at the time when the book was coming out, had put together that my mom died of cancer, and Aunt Joni had cancer, so mommies must get cancer.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
had told her, no, now just so you know, not all mommies get cancer.
Right.
But on the day that that book was called Had I Known, on the day that that book was coming out, I was taking Sevi to see my therapist in New York City. We were living on the East Coast at the time, and we were going to the book launch.
Okay.
And I got in the shower that morning and I found a lump in my breast.
Wow. Wow.
And there wasn't one second where I went, oh, it's nothing.
Right.
I knew immediately it was something because I wrote that book.
Yeah.
Now, and I mean, I did have a significant family history, but it didn't occur to me for a second. Had I not like not written that book, I would have just waited to my next mammogram.
Got it.
And so,
Well, that was very helpful that you
very
found it right
helpful,
away.
very helpful, very important
Yeah.
was a connection. Um, you know, it was an incredible connection between Joan and myself, who, as two very, very best friends can do. Because I just watched the documentary on Chris Everett and Martina
Oh, yeah.
Navratilova, and they were fiercely competitive. And now, they have gone through their not breast, but cancer journeys together.
Right. Right.
Joan and I used to argue whose breast cancer was worse.
Wow.
And I would be like, yours was so much worse. And she'd be like, are you kidding? Yours was so much worse. I'm like, we don't need to compete over this kind of thing, right? And it was funny because Chrissy and Martina did the exact same thing, and I
Oh,
was really
really?
by that. Yeah. But the reason why I share this with you is because um, I also had somebody, because we had gone through this, that we could be each other's cheerleaders, right?
Yes.
And so, and that book again was also a bestseller. So that book is really poignant and important because in some ways I really feel that book saved my life.
Wow.
And so that's really important. One of the hardest books I ever wrote is a book um, that I did with the woman who started moderation management,
I don't know.
which in the 90s was somewhere between AA and like no program at all. There is a large population of people who could just learn to moderate their drinking.
Okay.
Okay, so this woman, 𝐼𝐸𝐾 wrote a book that, started this program uh,
Right.
that taught people moderation management. And she was the toast of the town. She was on the cover of Newsweek. She did Sally Jesse Raphael, and she was creating this movement where people were like, yeah, you know what? I'm not an alcoholic. I can learn to moderate. This is great. She was the toast of the town until she killed 2 people drunk driving.
Oh, really? Wow.
And I got a call because she was getting released from prison. She was found guilty of manslaughter.
Wow.
Got a call from Alan Nevins, who was the agent, and he said, can you knock this book out? I think it's a really fascinating story because she killed a father and a daughter, a husband slash father and a daughter. And the wife slash mother befriended Audrey when she was in prison. And
Okay.
they had created a friendship based on forgiveness.
Wow.
And Alan said, I really think it's an incredible story of forgiveness and faith and, all the things that you would want it to be. And I will tell you, it was one of the hardest books I've ever written because Audrey had not a lot of remorse, did her time. She paid a big price. She
Yeah.
went to jail for 4 years, but she lost her own family as well. They deserted her. And she came out. She was addicted to drugs when she came out. She was still drinking.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and it was a story that I felt was so sad, and I could not wait. And when I mean like literally could not wait to be out of that book because it felt icky.
Got it.
And
Okay.
so I made a decision after that book that I wouldn't do anything that made me feel that way.
That's a good decision.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that can make you feel that way.
Oh, yeah.
And So I made that decision. And so yeah, that it just made me feel icky. Liz Smart made me feel a little icky, but it taught me a lot. And it was an important story.
Yeah.
And it wasn't icky because of the family, it was icky what she went through and also how mismanaged that investigation was.
So let's talk about two books that I hope weren't icky, okay? Because you and I have in common Melissa Etheridge and the Backstreet Boys, because I was instrumental in helping start their careers, both of them, and you've written their memoirs. And talk to me about Melissa and the Backstreet Boys. And I know people listening and watching this are going to be interested in them and their stories.
Sure. So I did not work with the Backstreet Boys. I worked with Jonas Brothers.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you worked with the Backstreet Boys too.
I did not. No,
Oh,
yep. So I
well,
can talk about the Jonas Brothers.
yeah, sure. Talk about them. I didn't work with them, but sure.
Yeah. I mean, so Melissa was amazing. As you know, Melissa is, she's an incredible songwriter. She's a very heartfelt
Yeah,
creator. She's amazing. I worked with her at a very challenging time in her life because she was going through a divorce. And she had two children with Julie Cypher, and it was a
right.
very high profile breakup. And she was writing an album that was very reflective of that time in her life. I was the first person, one of the first people she played it for. I still have the CD she made for me with the tracks
Oh,
that she recorded.
cool.
Yeah. But she was great to work with. And that was somebody, what I loved about Melissa was how open she was willing to be. And yet, what was amazing, there were things that she gave me that ultimately she said, I don't want to revisit any of it. I'll revisit it when we talk. But
Right.
like, here are my diaries from when I was a kid. Just take
Wow.
them.
Wow.
I don't want, yeah. And so she really trusted me. And I remember I was working in LA and I would sometimes I'd take myself out to dinner. I'd go to Luke's in West Hollywood and I'd have her diaries and I'd be like reading and when she was first on tour and the people that she was meeting and so it was really incredible. One thing that I find so fascinating about a lot of the people I've worked with is how well documented their lives were from the very beginning.
Oh,
So that
really?
they actually have their diaries from when they were kids and their report cards and the things that they want to go back to. It's a really strange but common thing among people who go on to become very well known.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So Melissa was fantastic. And I remember when I met her, we had met for coffee in Santa Monica somewhere and I mean, I just liked her. She's down to earth
She
and
is. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and when she moved, when she and Julie broke up, they took houses. This is well known, so I'm not saying anything but they took houses that shared a backyard so that they could see the kids.
Right.
If the kids were at Julie's house or at Melissa's house, and I think in theory it was a good idea. I don't know, and I don't know what the reality of it was, but I remember getting Melissa unpacked in the new house because she just couldn't do it. You
Wow. Yeah.
know, sometimes that's just what you do.
Yeah.
I just started unpacking boxes. I was in her kitchen going, "Hey, I'm going to put your glasses here and your dishes here, you know. And I would talk about great jobs, though.
Yeah.
It really, I'm so lucky. I mean, and, the Joe Bros, who I love, um, they were young when I wrote their book. Uh, there's the cover right there.
Yeah.
Um, they were going on tour. They were at the height of their popularity. And I had just found out I was pregnant when I got that book after
Oh.
7 rounds of IVF.
Oh.
And I wrote it for Hyperion, and they're like, you should go on tour with them. I'm like,
I don't think so.
it was what I would call a premium pregnancy, right? 7 rounds of IVF, and the only time I got pregnant, and I was of a certain age, and I just thought I can't, you
Right.
know. Um, but I delivered that book 2 days before I delivered my daughter.
Oh, really? You had two deliveries in 2 days.
Two deliveries in 2 days. And they were awesome to work with. They were on tour in Europe. They would finish a concert. They would call me. There was no video, there was no Skype they would
Right.
call me from their tour bus going from this venue to the next city they were going to. Sometimes I would talk to all three of them. Sometimes it would be Nick or Joe or, Kevin, and it would just be, whatever we were talking about, we did it all over the phone, which is kind of the equivalent of doing it over Zoom today,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we would do it in these like 1 hour slots. And yeah, so that they were great. They were so professional and so great to work with.
Wow. Cool.
They're
That's good to
kids. They were
hear.
young. They were still wearing their rings. Their
High school rings.
yeah, no, that they were going to stay. Oh, there's a name for it. That they weren't. They were staying virgins.
Oh, okay.
That's how young they were.
Oh, wow. Okay. So have
Uh,
you thought of writing your own memoir? You've had a life that people would be interested in.
I have not because
Why?
I still like doing what I do. And, for all the stories that I'm telling you, Rick,
Yeah.
it's the stories that I won't tell you that make me very, I think, likable as an author to the caliber of people that I work with. Because in so many ways, I'm the vault. And, my joke is I'm super fun at cocktail parties, but there's a lot that I know about people that I'm like a bartender. I just don't tell other people's secrets.
Right. I get that.
Right. And so it would be really hard for me, I think, to do my own book, and it would require me to find my own voice on the page,
That's
which
true.
I don't know really what that is. I did
Interesting.
an exercise when I had my film come out a few years ago. I did an exercise because CBS does this segment called Letter to My Younger Self.
Okay.
I do it on Sunday morning and on Sunday, and which I
Yeah.
love that show. And so I was up for a segment on Letter to My Younger Self. So I was tasked with writing that letter
Okay.
really hard because it was from me to me. So
Right.
it had to be my voice. And I wasn't channeling somebody else. And I had to also block out everybody else that I worked with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I haven't, but I do give a speech on 7 things that I've learned from telling other people's stories.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's a very popular speech because it's a way for me to talk about the people that I've worked with and impart really great storytelling and lessons.
So if somebody wanted to hear that speech, do they have to hire you or is it on video somewhere like on YouTube or
It might be. Yeah, I mean, I've done it at various places. But yeah, hiring me is always a good way to go. And you can reach me right
Oh no, I
at the
get
sake of
that.
books. Yeah. So, yeah, but yeah, and I enjoy doing it because people, man, I told you the greatest thing about what I do is what I get to learn,
Hmm.
what I get to learn along the way. I worked with this guy who's coach, a real estate coach who now, is the head of a, you know, very successful business, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, right? And the way he got me to write his book, I didn't want to write a book with a real estate coach. I was like, no. And he chased me for a year. And we were at dinner because this is what he would do. He would invite me and he would sit next to me and he would say, well, what if we did it on this? Or what if we did it on that? And one night he said, hey, have I ever told you about the 4 addictions?
Okay.
See, your face was my face.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, well, and I was just about to take a sip of my martini. And I put the drink down because I thought, oh, here we go, just addictions, you know. And he said, no, he said, I think there are 4 main addictions, and every other addiction is an offshoot of these
Okay.
addictions. What do you think they are?
Um, what is would gambling be an
That's an
addiction?
offshoot.
That's an offshoot. Well, I would say one would probably be sex-based, possibly.
Offshoot.
Offshoot.
Yeah.
Addictions. Uh, things like addicted to being recognized.
Okay, so that's close. So the 4 addictions are the addiction to the opinions of others, right?
Okay.
What other people think,
Okay.
the addiction to worry,
Okay.
addiction to drama, the
Okay.
addiction to past.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
And I thought, oh, he hooked me. and I wrote his book, and we put it on the New York Times bestseller list. A real estate coach with no
Wow.
recognition, because the book ended up not being about real estate. It was a book called Life by Design,
Okay.
and I think we did it with Dutton. And yeah, and he's doing about $8 million a year when we wrote that book. And I can't venture to say what he's doing now, but it's hundreds of millions.
Right.
And
Wow.
I'd like my share of that, please. But no, I mean, he's actually a very dear friend. His name is Tom Ferry. He's brilliant. Anybody in real estate knows Tom, and he's been very pivotal in introducing me to a lot of other people that I ended up working with. And it is my grand joy and pleasure to have written that book with him. But yeah, I mean, so when you have nuggets like that you hold on to, and this is what makes me fun at cocktail parties, because I can say, hey, you heard about, right?
I'd love to be at a cocktail party with you
Well,
sometime.
we're gonna make that happen. Yeah, yeah, we're gonna make
So
that happen.
we are sort of running out of time, but I need to ask you about one thing that I read in an article about you, um, because it just I had an experience with him as well, and that is you locked Richard Simmons into a limousine.
I did.
What was the circumstances behind that?
First, I want to say that that was my days of doing the exercise video. So I am the woman that brought the world Richard Simmons in the world of video.
Oh,
So
cool.
sweating to discos, sweating to the oldies, all of that. I worked with a great director by the name of Steve Purcell. And Richard would not learn his script. Richard was for sure ADD. Like, but he was truly one of the kindest people on the planet, and really genuinely cared about other people, and spent a good portion of his day reaching out to people who wrote him and just calling them out of the blue. But Richard would not learn his script, and we were getting ready to film. So I called him and I said, Richard, I'm going to pick you up. We're going to go for a ride. I had a pint of Haagen-Dazs, and I said, you can eat the Haagen-Dazs, but we have to go through the script.
And you
And
did.
drove around and drove around and drove around, and he was like, okay, I'm fine with it. Yeah. So, yeah,
I'll tell you quickly my
sure.
experience with Richard. I don't remember where I was flying. I think it was from LA to New York. And I show up in the waiting room outside the gate, or just, outside the gate. And there's an enormous circle of people. And inside the circle is Richard. And he's being Richard. Very, charismatic and open and flamboyant, but dressed in a business suit. Well, he didn't have a tie on, but he was. We get on the plane, and after it takes off, and you can get rid of the seatbelt sign, he apparently ducks into the bathroom, changes into his exercise thing, like with the straps and whatever, and spends the entire rest of the flight running up and down the aisle, exercising all the passengers. It
Yeah.
was the most memorable flight I was ever on.
That was Richard. I have to tell you, I mean, that was what's so amazing about him was he remind maybe I shouldn't make this analogy. He's somebody who really enjoyed spreading joy.
Yeah.
That is really what drove him and what filled his bucket. He was a very lonely kid. He in his mind he was the fat kid with no friends, and
Oh,
he never
wow.
lost that in his mindset. So he was a people pleaser, but what really filled his bucket was offering inspiration and joy to people. And a girlfriend of mine had suffered a miscarriage. And I mean, we were just chatting, just like it wasn't anything. And he goes, "Give me her number."
Wow.
And he didn't call her on the spot. But like 3 days later, my girlfriend calls me and she goes, "Are you kidding me?" I go, "What?" She goes, "Richard Simmons just called me, you know,
Wow.
and he called and spent a half an hour on the phone with her."
That's amazing.
Yeah, and just wanted to just talk to her, and again, to feel seen and heard. I see you, I hear you,
Yeah.
and he understood that. And I have a soft spot for that man, and I was sad that he passed away, and I recently watched the documentary on his family and his life, which is excellent if you haven't seen it. But yeah, no, but but I knew the only way to get Richard's attention was to lock him into a small space. You
Right.
know, if you've ever met Robin Williams in his day, he was impossible, like his train of thought and just to keep up with it. Joan Lunden says he's the hardest interview because you can't interview him. He
Yeah.
controls it. And that was a little bit like Richard.
Yeah. And
You
I
know,
think Jonathan Winters was another one like that
was
too.
he like that?
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure it was. Yeah. I mean,
We're
they
dating
were just,
ourselves with these names, but yeah.
yeah, they were just such creative. And you're right. I mean, I've seen many interviews with Robin Williams, and you're right. They weren't interviews, they were performances in a way.
Yeah, so in Joan's memoir, we put QR codes. So you can, when she's talking about interviewing Robin, you can scan the QR code and it goes to the footage of him on Good Morning America. And she's just laughing and he's like everywhere. And she just turns and goes, "Have you ever felt like you've lost control of an interview?" Like, and he takes her chair and he's like scooting her, across the stage. It's funny, but and you can, see it on YouTube. But yeah, how lucky are we that we get to work with people like this? Your career, in
Right.
music, and I see Melissa behind you,
Yeah.
that wasn't too far off from when I worked with Melissa, that album.
Yeah.
So, the top one, is that Yes, I Am?
No,
No.
the top one was her first album that had similar
Yeah,
features and
yeah,
Bring Some
yeah.
Water. And then the second one was Brave and Crazy.
Yeah. So those, I mean,
Those
that
two.
I worked with her like almost on the tail end of that.
Okay.
And you know, it's it's a pretty blessed life
Oh, yeah, it is.
to be able to do this. And I I mean that I get to count these people among my friends and mentors and and that we, stay friends. You don't stay friends with everybody, but for the
Right.
most part, I've stayed pretty close with the people that I've worked with and they come back. Like Susan,
Oh,
they come
and
back because
Joan. Yeah.
yeah, and Joan, yeah, that's a whole
Yeah.
nother story. I wouldn't have my writing career with Joan either. So, without Joan.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, and I've done multiple books with many of my authors, and in the business, people come back as well.
Yeah.
So it's good, and I'm lucky, and I hope that it stays that way, because publishing is ever changing. But I'm so happy and delighted that I'm bringing everything that I is my life's work and continues to be important to me to Blackstone, and I'm so proud to be a part of that family. So thank you for
We're
trusting me.
proud to have you part of it. Believe me. I'm excited.
Thank you. Me too. We're going to do some great things together. And thanks
Really.
for having me on your show.
Well, appreciate your being here. My show would be nothing if it wasn't for guests like you.
Well, thank you. I hope we brought some joy to people's lives today.
Absolutely. Thank you.